Finally, melee combat. This will be the end of general actions, and from here on we'll be discussing the more advanced stuff. So close combat is initiated when a unit enters the 6-inch radius around another unit. This is calculated from the center of a unit and also extends vertically as well. I'd like to hammer this one home because for those of you using the rulebook, it has a very different example that can be confusing. In the rulebook, it shows 2 units with this 6-inch circle overlapping. This is incorrect. The units only fight a close combat when they are actually in each other's circle. We played the way it shows in the book for a while and it was a miserable experience. This communication might be the entire reason that I am making this video guide. Anyway, a unit can only fight one enemy at a time in close combat. If there are multiple enemies, the turn player chooses which order that they fight in. If a unit uses a movement or boost action to enter an opponent's close combat range, this is considered a charge, and grants them a bonus to the attack that we'll discuss later. If 2 units on opposite teams entered close combat, but neither of them charged to get there, then either one of them, or both of them, may use the fall back option to disengage. Alright, let's go over the pacing of close combat once you're within dancing range of your opponent. First of all, you and your opponent roll for advantage. This will determine who attacks first. You both roll 1d6 and add your weapon's dexterity modifier. Oh wait, it goes up to 2d6 when you charge? I didn't know that, actually. If your unit is not equipped with a close combat weapon, it loses this advantage roll. The unit with the higher attack roll is the attacker, and the unit who loses becomes the defender. Okay, now that we've sorted out who the attacker is, you should check your abilities and weapons for any special modifiers to how many dice you will be rolling in the attack. This forms what is known as your attack pool. On a quick note, weapons that have the penetration tag that I talked about last time don't apply piercing damage to their attacks. Instead, they are allowed to use an ability known as One Strike. One Strike reduces your weapon strikes to 1, but grants you that attack penetration. Melee functions otherwise just like shooting. You roll to match or exceed your accuracy, and any numbers that do are considered a hit. Any that match or exceed your critical modifier also apply a roll on the damage chart as well. At this point, the defender rolls their defense pool. Just a brief reminder, this is the armor value that your unit has. Just like with shooting, you can also use your shield if your opponent is within your sight arc. Now we proceed to dealing damage. Just like with the shooting action, you count up the successful attacks and subtract them from the successful number of blocks. Your melee weapon damage is then multiplied by the remaining number of attacks and dealt to the opponent. If you have any crits remaining, you can also take this moment to roll on the damage table for unit damage. Once the attacker is done, they swap roles with the defender and repeat this process. During this time, the defender can also rotate to place the unit that it's fighting inside of their sight arc. You then repeat the 2nd to 4th steps and conclude combat. Before we get into the cleanup step of combat, I want to tell you about the modifiers to melee combat. So these are the things that will affect how combat proceeds. If you charge at a unit and you began that movement outside of their sight arc, you get an extra die added to your attack pool. If you entered close combat without a close combat weapon equipped, you immediately lose the advantage roll to determine who goes first. If neither of you has a weapon equipped, then you both just equip a weapon and then proceed as normal. It should be noted that when this happens, neither of you gets a dexterity bonus. If you're on the attack and you have level 1 or higher arm damage, the accuracy for all weapons becomes 5 or higher. If you're on the defense and you have level 1 or higher arm damage, you lose the ability to roll for your shield bonus. If you're attacking and have level 1 head damage, then the defender can reroll one of their failed blocks. If you charge to enter close combat, then you can reroll one of your failed attacks. Anyway, once you've let violence run its course, the unit who dealt the most damage is the victor, and the losing unit must fall back if it has the space to do so. If the damage dealt is equal, or neither unit deals any damage, then they both fall back. Falling back is kinda simple. The unit moves their full movement speed away from their opponent, starting at the edge of their close combat radius. This usually counts as a free movement. If you want, you can just use the position they were at when they were fighting at close combat, or where the bases are touching if you use bases. So the only big rule for falling back is that they have to be placed in valid terrain unless it is completely unavoidable. Also, you can't fall back off the edge of the battlefield, just move as far as you can and call it a day. While we're talking about being trapped, something my group came up with was corner escaping. So you might be thinking, what if I get trapped in a corner and I have to keep fighting close combats forever? We came up with what would be known as a dodge roll, where if you get into a spot where you'd be boxed in, you simply move past the opponent to their left or right and escape the corner. So if your unit does not have a close combat weapon at all, or if the one you had was like dropped or taken by an ability, you can still fight a close combat, you're just treated as unarmed, which can be a little different depending on which version of the game you're playing. If you enter close combat unarmed, it isn't treated as you changing weapons and you don't keep it equipped after close combat is over. If you're playing 2.0, unarmed combatants that win force the enemy to fall back, but the enemy does not take any damage or negative effects from it. If you're playing 2.01, unarmed combat was actually given some bite, and it is treated as a legitimate melee weapon. Quick reminder, after you're done with close combat, you'll still have your melee weapon out and equipped, which is what that token I showed you earlier was for. You'll need to swap back to your carried ranged weapons if you want to use them. Here's a table of melee weaponry that I won't be going over because a lot of them don't actually matter. The table you see here is just a guideline for weapons and their averages. Once you get out there, you're gonna see some serious stuff. It's funny, this section also talks about faction books, telling you more detail about the weapons, and that just never happened, so who knows, maybe someone really handsome and talented will make a video guide about the various factions at some point. If you make your own weapons, you're free to adjust the stats as you see fit to make it feel more authentic. Before you slap it down on the table, just make sure your opponents are okay with it. So let's run over the flowchart really quickly. An attacker selects their target and makes sure that they are within range and within sight. Both players check to see if either unit is not equipped with a close combat weapon. Any units that are not will immediately lose that advantage roll. If they both have a weapon, you roll for advantage and add your dexterity modifier. Compare advantage rolls to see who goes first. Whoever goes first is the attacker. If you want to use a one strike, now is when you announce it. Either way, you then roll your attack pool. Now, the defender checks their defense options, like abilities or shields. After this, they add their bonuses together and roll their defense pool. You then compare the attack and defense pool. If the defense is greater or equal to the number of attacks, then the attack is blocked. If the attacks are greater than the defense number, then it is successful. Just like with a shooting action, your opponent can break their shield to cut this damage in half and avoid any critical hits. You can now proceed to damage, which is the number of hits multiplied by your weapon's damage. Afterward, you roll the damage table for critical hits. If the defender isn't destroyed, then you move on to counterattack and swap rolls. That's kinda it. Melee is all about positioning and knowing your weapon's strengths and weaknesses. It should also be noted that just like ranged weapons, there's a secret menu of melee weapons that you'll find. I was gonna go over Piercing Strike a bit more, because apparently there's like 3 different Piercing Strikes. But I'll have a correction video about that coming out like next week or so. But before we go, let's go over the destruction table. So when a unit is attacked and can't block all of the hits, they take damage. Damage normally just reduces a unit's integrity, and once this number hits 0, it is destroyed under normal circumstances. When this destruction happens, you should roll on the destruction table. These rulings only really apply or matter if you want to play with pilots in mind, which is more for advanced players. But we'll go over it here anyway. A quick reminder. Damage is always equal to the damage value of the listed weapon times the number of successful attacks made. Then you subtract any defensive modifiers the opponent may have. If a unit is ever reduced to 1 integrity, then its pilot must make what is known as a morale check. We'll be covering this when I go over pilots. If a unit suffers damage from a critical hit, then once damage is done to its integrity, the attacker rolls on what is known as the damage table and applies the corresponding result based on whether the unit is a mobile suit or not. I'll throw it up on screen here for you to see. It should be noted that there is a sequence to these damage rolls. If you roll on a specific part, you apply damage to that part, and these damages do stack upon each other and last until the game is over or until the unit has repaired itself with an ability. If you roll a section once, you apply level 1 damage to that part. Simple enough. If you roll that section again, you apply level 2 damage to that part. If you roll a section that does not have a level 2, then you roll again until you get a different results. It actually doesn't say what to do if you hit the same section after it's already been maxed out, but I imagine you just keep going until you get something different. Anytime a unit suffers a critical hit, its pilot also makes a morale check. So the damage chart is as shown for mobile suits. A roll of 1 or 2 is leg damage. Level 1 turns any normal terrain into difficult terrain when you use a basic move action. Level 2 also cuts your boosting speed in half. Rolls of 3 or 4 is arm damage. Level 1 makes your accuracy 5 or higher for all weapons, and you can't use your shield in combat. Level 2 also turns any quick reloads into slow reloads. Rolls of 5 are head damage. Only one level on this one. Anyone defending against an attack from this unit may re-roll a single failed block. Rolls of 6 are torso damage. So this is the big jackpot. Torso damage immediately destroys the unit, disregarding any integrity. Yeah, critical hits are serious business. If the unit is not a mobile suit, you apply these penalties. Rolls of 1 to 3 are engine damage. Level 1, normal terrain becomes difficult terrain when performing any basic move actions. Level 2, in addition, they also have difficult and impassable terrain reduce their movement speed by 75%. Rolls of 4 or 5 are weapon damage. Level 1 makes your accuracy 5 or higher for all weapons, and they lose their shield bonus. Level 2 also turns quick reloads into slow reloads. Rolls of 6 are cockpit damage. The unit is immediately destroyed. I'm sure you're asking, well, how do I avoid this awful fate? If your unit has a shield, you can perform what is called a shield break. With this action, after attacks are confirmed but before damage is tallied and critical hits are applied, you can sacrifice your shield to reduce incoming integrity damage by half, rounded down, and avoid any rolls on the critical hit table. When this happens, the unit loses all bonuses and defensive values for their shield. So this one is up to you. Do you save your shield for a later engagement, or risk the chance of taking a critical hit and dying immediately? This seems like a no-brainer, but saving a good shield can come in clutch when matches come down to the wire. Alright, so when your unit is destroyed, either your integrity hits 0 or your opponent rolls a 6 in the damage chart, you roll on the destruction table. This really only matters if you play with pilot, since it determines whether or not you can redeploy that pilot later. On a roll of 1, the pilot or crew is dead. They are removed from play or the campaign if you're playing one, and you may give a death speech should you choose to. On a roll of 2 or 3, they receive major injuries. You reduce their health by 4 and their mind by 3. The unit they were piloting is removed from play. On a roll of 4 or 5, they suffer minor injuries. Their health and mind are reduced by 2. The unit that they were piloting is removed from play. On a roll of 6, they get a lucky escape. Their mind is reduced by 1, and the unit is removed from play. So that's actually it for melee and unit damage. If you just want some good old mobile suit on mobile suit action, you're actually all ready to go. From here on, we'll be talking about some more advanced and less defined mechanics of the game, like flight, aerial units, pilots, and crews, so I'll see you then.